One of the things I have been thinking about recently is how integrity preserves us. I was watching this show, Suits, which, if you don't know the premise of the show, it's basically there's a big, New York law firm, and this guy named Mike, he is a fraud. He hasn't gone to law school, he hasn't passed the bar, and he is practicing law without a license. And the show is really focusing in on being this big hotshot lawyer and winning and always winning over certain crises that arise and whatever. But one of the things I've been thinking about while watching this show is how so much of this trouble, most of this trouble, if this was real life, would not even remotely be a problem if these people were walking in integrity. It's because of the lack of righteousness, the lack of integrity, that these people are in all these situations. Like if Mike had never gone against the law, if he had never, committed these crimes and being a fraud, he would not be in these situations of, oh, they're going to find out. And what's important to realize in the narrative of this show is how much we are presented with the idea that that's the only way. It's the only way. Well, Mike, he would have just been miserable. He would never have been able to do his purpose in life if he hadn't committed fraud. And we're sympathizing with him and, all these things. But I think it's so important for us to understand that when we really turn away from sin, when we really put sin away from us, there is so much freedom and safety that can come in this life because of that. Now, reversely, it's important to understand that that does not mean that there won't be trouble in this life, because God has told us over and over again that when you truly pursue righteousness, when you live a godly life, you will have tribulation, you will have troubles, you will have persecution. So it's we got to be careful that we don't fall into this belief that's really common, and I've fallen into this belief of believing that as long as I walk in this path of integrity, of righteousness with God, that I won't have any suffering, basically, or not intense suffering. And that's really not true. But one of the things I have seen in my life, after God has just done so much in my life, is seeing how much misery was in my life before that I totally thought was reasonable. I thought it was just because of life, but it was all coming into my life because of sin. It was all coming into my life because I wasn't having the right relationships I should be having with people, the values that I held in my heart, the ways that I was trying to live my life. All of these things was bringing all this trouble into my life. And when I truly have repented of those things, there's so much freedom and healing and health that has come into my life because I'm not walking in those sinful ways. In Proverbs 10, verse 9, it says, "He who walks with integrity walks securely, but he who perverts his ways will become known." What God has given us in this life is hope in righteousness. This is really important for us to talk about because this message is being lost in how people talk about the gospel today, as if God is against righteousness, as if God doesn't expect righteousness, when the very pathway that God is giving to us, he's saying, here is hope, is godliness and righteousness. If you look at Psalm 37, read it in your own time because I'll try and keep this video as short as possible. But Psalm 37 is talking about there's these wicked people. What do we do? How do we deal with the fact that there is such wickedness in the world? And God is directing people to not fret, to not be overly angry at these things, but what? To focus on righteousness, to focus on godliness, and in that have hope. In that, trust in God, that he will reward the righteous and he will reward the wicked. Our hope is in living a righteous life. And just from my experience of I don't know, turning away from certain sins and coming to understand sin more and more, I see what God is saying about even for this life, how much it preserves us. I see that there's so many troubles that I'm being saved from because I'm not engaging with sin. There's so many um, afflictions that we are afflicted of because of sin. And that's very different to be afflicted because of our sin than to be afflicted because of righteousness and being persecuted for righteousness' sake.